Hi, we're making this film today for people who are interested in learning more about the Verifit. There might be those who have recently received a Verifit and they need training, or it could be those who already have a Verifit or an Axiom or the portable version of the Verifit, which is called the RM500SL, SL for Slimline, and they want to get more out of it, use more of the functions. Okay? So this online seminar, or in-service training, you might want to call it, will be maybe an hour to an hour and a half. Okay? So sit back and relax, and I hope that this gives you more information and maybe gives you more utility from the equipment that you have just purchased or that you already have. Or maybe it's a way to learn about equipment that you intend to purchase sometime in the future. Anyway, when you boot up the Verifit Axiom or the portable, I'll just talk about the Verifit, but it applies to all of them. And the Axiom and the portable Verifit have most of the features. Okay, there are some features in the Verifit that will not be available in the other two. And different reps can elaborate on that. But most of the functions, many of them, are the same or very close to the same in all three products. Anyway, when you boot them up, in other words, you turn them on and let them boot up themselves, no special process. This is the opening screen and the initial menu. One thing that would be helpful is to check the version of software if you have this product. And if you hit help here, it might give you the version of software. Well, you know what? It doesn't. I don't know where to find it in there. Okay. Well, oh, software version right here, 3.10.1. That's the latest version. Sorry about that. The help is very useful, and in different software, you're used to hitting help or about and finding the version of software, so I just automatically did that when it's right in front of me. So the version of software should be right here, and 3.10.1. 3.10.1 is the current version. It's if you don't have that, all you have to do is go to the AudioScan website, www.audioscan.com, and you will see a function for downloading the current software. So you hit download, you go to the Verifit software, or the 500SL, or the Axiom, and then follow the instructions on downloading it. And when on this Verifit, for example, I just did the upgrade myself just moments ago. I'm going to sit down so I can operate this more easily with the mouse. But how I did that is I just turned it on with the old software and it went to setup, and then went to CD-ROM, and I pressed this button for opening the CD drive. After I do, I get a message saying you can open the CD drive. So I opened the drive, pressed the button, the drive opened, and I put in the new CD and I closed the door. After that, and I hit continue here. After I did that, I got a message that it sensed that a new CD with a new version of software was in place. And it said, shut the unit off now. Turn it back on and it will install. And it installed itself. And then I don't remember what happened. I think maybe it tells you shut it off and turn it back on again, and voila, you have the new version of software. The new version of software has a couple of new features. Two that come to mind most immediately are, first of all, NL2 as a fitting formula that you can choose, as well as an enhanced algorithm when it does a test of directional microphones, front and rear directional microphone, and I'll show you all those things. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to sit down again because it's easier for me to operate this. In the typical operation, of course, you would hit tests. And when you do, from the initial menu, you get this intermediate menu. And from here, the two things that you would use the most are either test box measures, which will include everything you're doing in a test box, and that includes pediatric fittings, because you will do those in the test box rather than having a possible one-year-old patient sit still with tubes in their ears. And you can accurately do that because the system employs the DSL method. And I'll explain that all to you when we get to it. And if you're going to do anything on ear, including doing visible speech mapping as a fitting process or verification process on adults, then you would use the on-ear measures. So I'm going to go to test box measures first, okay? And when I show you speech map in here, that will be very much like it'll operate almost exactly like speech map would operate on the ear, okay? So let me just go through some of these test box features before we get to the speech mapping. The reason I want to do that is most people who have a test box don't use it. And a lot of people who have a Verifit don't use the test box portion of it either, especially if their main mission in life is fitting modern digital hearing aids on adults. But in this particular test box, unlike others, there are lots of very useful things that you would use every day if you knew the full utility of it. So I think this will be helpful. So let me show you some of the most effective tests that are in here, useful. One of them might be this multi-curve test. Another one, this distortion test. Another one, noise reduction. Another, directional. That's for directional microphones to actually verify the efficiency or effectiveness of the directional aspect of the hearing aid. And you'll be surprised at some things that you might find. Battery drain. We'll just talk about those. Before we do those, let's just do the calibration of the test box. Okay? This is very simple. It takes actually less than a second. You remove any couplers, like this, from the hearing aid, from the coupler microphone. There are two microphones in the box. Okay? One is the coupler microphone. This is what the actual measurement is made in. Okay? It's a 1-inch coupler microphone, and then there is a reference microphone. And they plug into the box where they are labeled. One is labeled, the reference microphone plugs in there, and the coupler microphone plugs into its place. And in order to actually accomplish the calibration, you take the couplers off and you place the two microphones in the box like this, okay, right together, like almost touching each other, with the reference microphone right smack in the middle, and even touching is okay, in the middle of the coupler microphone. All right, so I'm plugging in the coupler microphone, I'm plugging in the reference microphone, and now I am placing them so that they are together, sitting actually perpendicular, just as closely together as I can get them. Closing the box, latching it, and then hitting calibrate here. Watch this. It's done. And you notice I have a flat line. The flatter that line, the better you did. Okay? Let's see what would happen if we didn't have them so close. I have them close, but just a separation between them, maybe ½ inch. Okay, so you see it's not quite flat over here. And that would be actually in every hearing aid curve that you got. That would be built into it if we weren't careful. Now that might not be a crisis if that were built into each curve, but the further it is from right position, the worse that gets. So I straighten them out, and that's what I got. Once you get used to that, it doesn't even take 1 second. Now, whenever you want to get back to performing any test, the best thing to do is right-click. And that gives you a virtual keyboard. It's the same as the keyboard that's on front of the unit here. And so I'm just going to hit Tests. I get this menu back. It's an intermediate menu, test box, and now I can go to any of my tests. And I'm just going to start with multi-curve. Okay? Now, before I start, I'm taking my hearing aid. This happens to be an Oticon Agile. Right? I'm connecting it to the appropriate coupler. Okay? And there are connectors to connect all the new hearing aids to the appropriate coupler. Okay, this is a BTE version of the Agile, and so I'm using the BTE coupler. However, if I had an open fit hearing aid, then I would instead be maybe doing something else. Okay, in other words, I would have a coupler adapter, and I would putty the coupler adapter onto maybe the in-the-ear coupler. And you can get those adapters from any of the manufacturers of open fit hearing aids. Okay, so you shouldn't have a problem coupling any hearing aid. All right, well, I'm going to hit this, and I now have a gain curve on the hearing aid with a 60 dB input. And if I like that, I will just hit continue. And now I'd like to see what happens in this hearing aid if I go up to 70. So I'm going to use curve number 2 and adjust my intensity to 70, from 60 to 70, and see what happens. Well, my gain went down from what I had with a 60 dB input. When I raised the input to 70, there was less gain. Makes sense. That's the concept of compression. So I hit continue there, and on my third one, I'll move it up to 80. All right, and just like we'd expect, the gain went down even further. And then finally, I'll go up to 90. So now I have a 90 dB input, and I expect the gain to even be further reduced. So I have some gain curves at different levels. In this case, 60, 70, 80, and 90. And I can see that the compression is working, because as the input level to the hearing aid goes up, the gain goes down. Exactly what I'd expect. And most manufacturers will publish this family of curves. Okay? So now I want to do another test, so I'm right-clicking, going back to Tests, and Test Box Measures, and we'll choose something else. Let's go up to distortion. Okay, and when would you maybe use this? Well, let's say somebody comes in and they say to you, this hearing aid isn't clear. It's not like it was when I first got it, or it's brand new and it's just not clean. I don't hear people's voices clearly. It's not as sharp as it should be. Any kind of thing like that. Clean, sharp, clear, crisp. It's a fidelity issue, okay? Or at least a supposed fidelity issue. And so this would be a great test for the hearing aid, okay? And this particular sequence is great because it does total harmonic distortion in 1/3 octaves, all the way from 250 hertz to 4,000 hertz, all right, the speech range. So if I hit Start Test, and I'm going to move this to 65 dB, which is going to represent conversational speech, And I'm going to say, all right, now let's just quiet down in the room, and we'll see how how we can measure the fidelity of this hearing aid. So now I'll hit continue. Okay, so as you can see, the fidelity is very good, other than the 4,000 here. Don't know what happened there. But I have all zeros and ones, and that's what you would expect from a good digital hearing aid. Now, what could have happened here? I think I know what happened. Right next to this, you don't see it, but right here, I have a projector running. The projector has a fan in it and a motor, and so naturally you wouldn't want something like that running right on the same table and influencing a distortion measurement. Okay, so this is wrong. I ran this hearing aid before we started this video. Of course, I didn't even have the projector on, and it is actually 0 distortion at 4,000. And that's what you'd expect from any good hearing aid. But then suppose a patient says to you, well, you know what, it sounds fine when I'm sitting here in quiet talking to you, but when I go into the office where everybody's yelling, then I can't really understand. These voices seem to be distorted. Well, let's see. What happens when we go into the office? Yes, people are speaking up because they have to talk over all the ambient noise from copy machines and people, discussions that are taking place, and air conditioning running, all those kinds of things. So let's do it again, but this time actually do it with 80 dB rather than the 65 dB. Maybe the distortion will shoot up off the scale, and we will have confirmed the patient's complaint. So, continue. Okay, even with an 80 dB input, we have zeros, most is 1% of total harmonic distortion. These types of digital hearing aids are extremely high fidelity, extremely clean, crisp. Okay, so that's how patients would describe the sound. We have verified that there is not any electrical distortion in this hearing aid, and we might have found out just the opposite. Why is this 0 now where it was 7 before? Well, with a higher input, we are probably getting beyond the influence of the projector that's sitting right next to it. Okay, so that was that feature. Let me sit down again and go back to tests and find something else to show you. That's pretty useful. How about we do the directional next? Now, many times you want a directional microphone for your patient. Could be a student that's in class and has a severe hearing loss, and you want them to be able to focus on sounds that are coming from the front, okay, where the teacher is. They're sitting right in the front row, rather than noises from in back of them and to the sides, because that they are other students who are mumbling to each other, and they are whispering and rattling papers and texting, etc., whatever students do, instead of listening to the teacher. Okay, and so there's a directional microphone. In the case of adults, naturally, when they're having a conversation with somebody, they're looking right at them, and you would love to attenuate other noises from the rear and the sides. So many hearing aids use 2 microphones in order to accomplish this. And you have really no idea of the efficacy or the effect of such a thing unless you're able to test it like this. Okay? Just like on distortion, if you just listen to it with your scope, you would hear gross distortion, so there'd be no question. You wouldn't have to test anything. You'd contact the manufacturer. But if it's more subtle, it might be tough to notice or to know whether that's normal for the instrument or not. Okay? All right, so let's see how to do this. And now you might wonder, oh, I wonder how the hearing aid is supposed to be positioned in the box. Okay? Well, let me now show you the real purpose for using the help menu. If I go here and I go to help, it knows where I am and that I am on the directional measurement. Okay? So it went right to directional. And look, ITE positioning, how should an ITE hearing aid be placed in the box? And in my case, BTE positioning. So I'm opening the box now and making sure that my hearing aid is positioned like the diagram. And it wasn't, it was just the opposite. I could have misinterpreted the results had I not moved the hearing aid to the proper position in here. Okay? Position only makes sense. Makes sense because this is going to be the front speaker, okay, front of the hearing aid, as opposed to the rear, okay, right here. All right, when I'm done that, I'm just going to hit cancel. I just went to help for a moment, and now I'm going to hit number 1. And this is a good intensity for it. It's just the intensity of conversational speech, okay? And now I'm moving the hearing aid slightly around in order to find the sweet spot. Oops, wrong way. Here we go. Yeah, let me stand up and see what I'm doing. When I stand up, I get in the way of the camera. They told me not to get in the way, but there we go. All right, so now you can see it. Of course, it's picking up my voice here. I have the box open. What happened? My battery die or something? Ah. In case you wanted to know what happened there, my coupler microphone became unplugged. I'm shutting the box so my voice doesn't affect it much. Okay. This thick line is the actual, this is the front, and this is the rear, okay? This software actually produces, in the directional mode, 2 sets of frequencies. One set is delivered by the front speaker, that's our left speaker, and the other set of frequencies is delivered by the right speaker. The relationship of these frequencies, they're warble tones, modulated tones. The relationship of them is this, okay? So the system can discriminate between the front and the rear. Left is front, right is rear. It can discriminate, and it can show the curve, the front curve versus the rear curve. And the more distance there is between them, the more separation you have, the more effective the directional effect of the microphone is, the more efficacious it is. Okay? And people have found all kinds of things. One, that those two curves are superimposed, and no matter what you do, there is no sweet spot. They don't separate. Okay? Sweet spot, I only mean moving the hearing aid around slightly until I get the maximum separation. Okay? The right general direction, but just moving it slightly to get the proper separation. And so, once I have that, I just let it run. And at this point, if I hit continue, it'll freeze it. Okay? The thicker of the two lines is front. This is rear. We have found where they're superimposed. In other words, there is no directional effect. Okay? Maybe it's inadvertently turned off in the software, or the second microphone isn't even wired or something like that. Also have found where they're the opposite. No matter what I do, when you see them opposite, where the thinner of the lines is the top line and the thicker one's on the bottom, you're thinking, well, you have the hearing aid turned around wrong. You don't have it oriented properly in the box. So you check that and you recheck that, and finally you think, I do have it here right, but I still have this problem of actually patient will hear better from the rear than the front. That has been found. It has gone back to the factory, and it has been reported that the two microphones were crisscrossed internally, miswired. And how would you ever know? And wouldn't that be a disaster for someone wearing that hearing aid? It would not only be, they'd be better off if that feature wasn't even on it than to have it reversed. And there would be no way to know that except something like this. And once you get used to this, it only takes moments to do. Okay, so much for that. See, I hit continue, just freezes it. And it marks which one is left. See the little L's and R's on them for left and right speaker. Okay, and you'll find that some directional microphones are more effective than others. And when this is a very important feature, if you have several makes and models of hearing aids that you've been playing with in this, you might recommend certain ones even, because you'll be able to actually verify the efficacy of that feature. Okay? What about noise reduction? This is a good one too. Okay? I'll leave the hearing aid where it is now. And so here's the scenario of the noise reduction test. It's like this. Suppose you were sitting in the lobby of a hotel, and you're having a conversation with your friend who just came in. She came in from the airport, and she's just passing through. You haven't seen her in years, and you're having a nice conversation in a relatively quiet hotel lobby before she has to run and catch her next flight. And then there's some guy, just at the moment that you're catching up with her life, right? Some guy comes along with a vacuum cleaner. What do you hope your hearing aid would do? And that would be, well, to try to enhance the signal to noise of this conversation, it would reduce that vacuum cleaner, okay? You would hope that. Oh, well, we could actually see if that would happen with this feature, okay? So I'm turning it on, and I'm choosing in here vacuum, meaning vacuum cleaner, versus just noise, road noise on a bus or an air conditioner running. The vacuum is the best one. And what do we have? Well, we got it pretty loud, 80, 85 dB. That's how loud that vacuum cleaner would be at least. Okay, and start test. Okay, and this is what we expect to see, hopefully. And I hope you can see this on this video, but there are two curves here. The thicker curve was the vacuum cleaner when immediately when it came on. This was a snapshot of it, of the response, of output and response of the vacuum cleaner, okay, at 85 dB. Here's the peak at 85 dB. And then we let it run for a while, let the hearing aid finally decide that, oh, I think it's a vacuum cleaner and not speech. Let's try to reduce that in order to give us some better signal-to-noise ratio. And then within a few seconds, we actually saw this thinner line. This was the instantaneous, right, before the noise suppression could kick in, and then here's the result of the noise suppression. In this case, signal-to-noise ratio was enhanced by 8 dB. Doesn't seem like much, but it makes a big difference when it's signal-to-noise ratio. Again, on some hearing aids, you might find there's none of this. These lines remain superimposed. There is no noise reduction. Could be inadvertently shut off in the software. And you'll find that some makes and models are more effective at this than others. But it's a great test, and it's a great way to show the benefit in a pretty easy to understand way of some of these features. Okay, so what did we do so far? We did multi-curve, which is a really great way of just checking the general gain responses of hearing aids, and also showing the efficacy of compression, that the gain of the hearing aid reduces each time the input to the hearing aid is increased. Okay? We've also done distortion, the fidelity of the hearing aid under conversational and then louder speech. And we have done noise reduction and a check of directional microphones. Let's do one more that's pretty good as far as being helpful. Battery drain. Okay. Now somebody comes in and they're complaining that the hearing aid is eating batteries. So you let the person explain what they're experiencing, and then you have to decide, well, do we have something wrong, or is it maybe that their expectations are not appropriate? Or are they buying maybe batteries that have had too much shelf life in a drugstore, and they should be buying from you instead? Or is there a problem in the hearing aid that's actually making it eat battery? Well, there's no way to know except this. Okay? And it does this very effectively. Okay? So I used a battery pill. This is a battery pill. And the unit like a Verifit comes with several of these to actually simulate any of the Cairn batteries. I'm using the number 13 in this Oticon Agile. Okay? And so this battery simulator, or battery pill, they call it, actually simply gets inserted into the hearing aid, and you can close the door right on it because it's got a flat wire, and then plug it in where it says battery simulator or battery pill, and then just hit start. Okay, that's it. Now, this is very, very significant, and the way this does this is better than it is done anywhere else. Okay? And that is that it has given you 3 numbers here, okay, and 3 corresponding bar graphs, okay. And what we did is apply a signal just to this hearing aid, 3 different, that put the hearing aid under 3 very different conditions. Okay, the first condition is quiescent. Now that's an engineering term that refers to no signal being processed. In other words, in quiet. Okay? What does battery drain do? How much is the battery, or how much current is being drawn from the battery of the hearing aid when there is no input? And then, how much current is being drawn from the battery with 1,000 hertz is 65 dB, representing conversational speech? And what if we use that signal at 90 dB? Now the patient goes into a very loud environment. So the patient will go through, in the course of a day, all 3 of these conditions and everything in between, okay? From quiet to loud to conversational. Well, this did all 3 of these, all vastly different, okay? And if the hearing aid has numbers, like in this case, at quiescent, right, quiet, 0 dB, the battery drain is 1.37 milliamps. Okay? And that is about right for the typical open fit or small, relatively small behind the ear hearing aid, or in the ear hearing aid, or in the canal hearing aid. At 1,000 hertz of 65 dB compensational speech, you have 1.38, and at allowed 90 dB input, you have 1.39. This is good current regulation. Under vastly different conditions, you still have the same number. Okay? If you got to add any old hearing aid out, right, non-digital, old hearing aid, what you would find is there would be the least amount of battery drain at quiescent, then a medium amount of battery drain at 1,000 hertz. Now this would go off the scale at the loud input because it would clip and everything else. But on good modern hearing aids, you're like this, almost the same number, excellent current regulation. If suppose these were kind of normal, and what's normal? Around 1.2 to 1.5, 1.6 on a moderately powered hearing aid, and then if you get one that's real high gain or something, it'd be more like 2 milliamps. Okay, just a rule of thumb. 1.5 on the lower power stuff, and on the high power stuff around 2 milliamps. You don't have to know much more than that, but the manufacturer, the number they give you is this middle one, by the way, if they specify battery drain. So having the 3 tells you more. The patient might have, when you say that, boy, when you give it a loud noise as an input, if your battery drain goes way up, say instead of 1.39, it's like 3.0. Okay, well there's a problem, and it's a big problem. And then your patient might then reveal some more information, like, oh, you know what? It only started eating batteries since I started working at the factory, which is loud as could be. You know, all right, there's the answer. Maybe a more modern hearing aid with good regulation, and it wouldn't make any difference what the environment was. He wouldn't be eating hearing aids. Another thing that this does, I hope you can see it, is it gives you a counseling tool. You put the battery type in here. See, those are the different battery types, a 10, a 312, a 13, and a 675, if anything uses that anymore. And then how many hours a day that the patient expects to wear the hearing aid. You put that in there. And then it's going to tell you the estimated battery life, okay? And so here we have like 15 days at 8 hours a day. So it's a counseling tool as well, so that the patient's expectations don't exceed what is possible. Okay, so that's a good test. All right, well, that's all we'll do here. We'll go into speech mapping, because I don't want this to take all day. You don't have any more time. The other tests are less useful. Okay, I'll just tell you what they are. Linear and AGC, and there are no linear hearing aids anymore, okay? So you just be using this AGC. If you use that, it just goes through, you just put the hearing aid in there and you make sure it's on and you and turned up all the way, and you get that ANSI sequence. People very seldom do this. I know they do it in universities, but they seldom do it in real life today because it's difficult. And it was meant to compare what might be done at the factory with what you actually have now that you're out of the factory in the real world. And so you can compare apples and apples. But in order to do it, all the features have to be turned off, and the hearing aid gain turned all the way up, everything all the way up, compression off, noise reduction off, etc. And so people seldom do it. Some of the software, fitting software, has a test box mode, which would make it a little easier. You just have to hit one button and then it puts it in the proper mode for those tests. But I don't see people doing this. I do see them doing directional. I see them doing noise reduction, distortion, multi-curve, and battery drain. sometimes telecoil. If the telecoil is important for an individual, what this test will do when you run it, there's a section in the Verifit that has a T on it, on the base of it. When you open the box, there's a section that has a T written on it, and so you would place the hearing aid on that, and then engage this. And I move it around to find a sweet spot, and there's a number that varies, and that number is the gain, okay, the telecoil gain. That's the number that the manufacturer gives you. Once I get the highest number, then I hit go, and it draws a curve. And I compare that curve with the microphone curve. The more it looks like a microphone curve, the more the patient's going to like it, okay? And the more they're going to actually use it. If it looks way different than the microphone curve, which hopefully is excellent, then the less useful it'll be. And you have that number, that gain number, to see if it corresponds with the amount of telecoil gain the manufacturer specifies. So that's good. I can't show it to you because I don't have telecoil in this hearing aid. Manual control is useless. Multi-curve input-output I don't do. Okay, it's mainly meant to show the compression of the hearing aid. I can show it just fine by doing several curves at different input levels. Noise reduction we did. Feedback. This is a test of the efficacy or effectiveness of the feedback reduction in the hearing aid. In other words, we purposely put the hearing aid into a feedback condition. We see the feedback suppressed, and we run an average speech curve, like there's a paragraph that's repeated in here of real speech, and compare it with the feedback suppression engaged versus not engaged. And hopefully they will be the same, okay, in that the feedback suppression didn't actually kill part of the speech response. And so that might be useful to you. Okay, so those are the test box features that I think would be useful and helpful in most clinics. And of course now speech mapping. This is the golden jewel of this instrument. This is what you'll use it for 99% of the time. This is where we actually have the functions of sales. It's a massive sale, powerful sales tool. So sales is one. Counseling is another. Fitting the hearing aid more scientifically. You're now blending science with the art that you have developed over the time that you've been dispensing. Verifying how well this hearing aid is doing relative to a person's hearing loss, and then troubleshooting. So sales, counseling, fitting, verifying, and troubleshooting. Okay? Those are the 5 functions. And audiologists that do this regularly as part of the fitting of every single patient, not only the fitting, but sale, counseling, fitting, verifying, and troubleshooting. It's part of the world of patient flow in their office. They will tell you that before they started doing this, and they were fitting simply using the manufacturer's fitting algorithm, software, no matter what it was. And then once they started doing this on all fittings, not just special cases, they found out consistently that about 1/3 of the time, they look at that fitting on their visible speech map measurement, and they go, wow, that's great, it's perfect, I don't have to touch it. All I hit is first fit, or whatever it is that the manufacturer recommends, and I got perfection. Great, great. But that's 1/3 of the time, because research has proven that 2/3 of the time, 66% of the time, hearing aids are misfit if no measurement was made. And so they see that, and they say, man, I would have let this go out like this, because a good place to start is whatever the manufacturer recommends. Okay, good place to start, tweak it from there. But I know I can do better. I'm not letting this walk out the door like this. I'm going to do better. Okay, and so that's the point. There was a Consumer Report article a few years ago, and people would actually come into practices with that article because it was brilliantly done. The journalist who wrote the article did lots of research, and she ended up at the speech and hearing clinic at Vanderbilt University, and she was talking to Todd Ritkins, and he said they had just done research, and their research showed that that 2/3 of hearing aids that are fit in other places without any type of measurement in the ear are misfit, usually underfit. Okay, now that wouldn't happen at Vanderbilt, but these were patients that were fit elsewhere. So anyway, every expert would agree with this should be part of fitting. Okay, it's the blending of science and art, and anybody who does this regularly and consistently, Audiological Consultants of Atlanta, for example, they will tell you exactly the same thing. Those who don't use it at all, or simply use it only in certain cases, then they're kind of missing out. They're driving blind, and you don't really realize the benefit until you use it consistently. All right, so I'm off my soapbox, and let's get to how do we do this. Okay, I'm going to sit down because I have to operate it with the mouse. I hate doing it standing up. Okay, so here's what we do. All I did from my list is I chose test box measures or on ear, and we'll go and do some things on the ear in a minute. But I'm choosing this for ease to do in the test box. Speech map is my selection. I'll have that same selection on the ear, and it's going to operate exactly the same way. So you're learning how to do both now. Okay. Okay. On this side of the screen, there are some criteria that we have to fill out. We're going to tell the system what kind of hearing aid do we have. All right. One thing we don't do is open fits like this. We're not going to fit an open fit in the box with what we call simulated real ear measurement. What I'm doing now is simulated real ear measurement. All pediatric audiologists, almost all of them, everywhere, here in Atlanta, the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, in Birmingham, Children's Hospital of Birmingham, big pediatric practices like Pediatric ENT of Atlanta, they all use the Verifit, and they all use this technique to fit pediatric patients, usually with BTEs. Okay, how do they get away with this? Okay, how they get away with it is a thing called RECD. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Really, a coupler difference, right? Because you're telling me that we can fit a hearing aid on a 12-month-old child in a steel coupler like this, a 2cc coupler. That doesn't represent this kid's ear. That's a mortal sin. You go straight to hell for that. Okay, and that would be the case. Would absolutely be the case if it wasn't for RECD. RECD is real ear to coupler difference. Okay, in other words, if the machine knew the response of the coupler, which it does, and it knew the response of the ear of the patient, then bye-bye patient, we don't need you, because it can accurately simulate that ear in the box. Okay, it's a marvel of modern science. Okay, so you say, well, we don't have the RECD. We're not making that measurement in this 12-month-old child either. Well, true. You can either make it or not. On some older patients, you can. And if you don't, well, then you'll put in the age of that patient. I'll show you. And DSL has norms over decades and thousands of children that are very, very accurate. Okay, that's how we get away with it. Okay, so it's a BTE hearing aid, and of course the mode is test box instead of on the ear. You can have single view or dual view. Dual view is where you see both ears side by side, and I like to look at that when I'm done just to make sure they match up. Right? But otherwise I see it better as a single view. And of course I want a graph instead of a table of all numbers, and I do this in SPL, but I could do it in HL, though that drives me crazy, so I don't. All right, now I'm going to fill out these things. So I hit audiometry, and a few more questions. One, which ear am I doing? I've already selected the right ear. There's a button on the front for right and left. And now what, if I want a fitting formula, like a fitting prescription, what do I use? Well, if I'm doing a child, it's DSL child. If I'm doing an adult, okay, if it's first fit or something, I would use this NL2. Okay, new fitting formula. So if it's a patient getting their first hearing aids, first fit, definitely NL2. It's less gain, and if you look at them, you'll see, than NL1. So you can use any fitting formula you want, but for pediatrics, it's definitely DSL child. Right? There's also a DSL adult. So I'm going to choose DSL child. I wouldn't use this can't fit, I don't even know what that is. Or some people don't use a fitting formula at all, because when you're doing visible speech mapping, which is what this is, then you know what's audible, what's not audible, and what's too loud. You don't necessarily need a fitting formula, though I know most audiologists feel best with a formula. Okay, so DSL child in this case. All right, and now, what about the age of the child? All right, and you'll see ages here from as old as 10 years old all the way down, 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 in 1 month increments, all the way down to 1 month old. Okay, this is the beauty of DSL, which comes from the University of Western Ontario. Down the street, by the way, from AudioScan, so they're in cahoots. It's a good cahoots. And how did you get the audiogram? Did you have headphones? Did you have inserts? Did you have inserts, and instead of a foam plug like so, you used the person's ear mold instead? Good. Sound field? Sure. Or did you get them from ABR? And if you got the thresholds from ABR, did you get them EHL or NAL? Okay, it's important to know the difference. What EHL means, ABR, EHL. EHL is effective hearing level. In other words, I found thresholds to tone bursts. And then I took those thresholds, the ABR thresholds, the lowest signal level, stimulus level, that I obtained a repeatable wave 5 response. Okay, that lowest level. And I corrected it, right? ABR doesn't go right down to threshold. I applied a correction. Now I can get closer to threshold if the patient's sedated and you're in a real quiet atmosphere and all this kind of stuff. But in most places, there is a correction. So if I have ABR thresholds that have been corrected, and whoever's giving you that information is saying these are the estimated hearing thresholds, estimated hearing level, okay, then, or equivalent hearing level, then I would select this. If it is just exactly as it came off the ABR machine, I got a response at 1,000 hertz down to 50 dB NHL. Well, then you'll choose NHL. You didn't correct it. All right? So let's say in this case we did ABR, but we corrected it on our patient. And then if bone conduction is a factor, you're going to enter it. Otherwise, it's NA. Right? As far as RECD, I am either going to use the average, because this kid isn't going to sit still, even if it takes seconds in order to be able to do this. Or I'm going to enter it because I measured it before, an older kid. I'm going to measure it now, an older kind of cooperative kid. All right, I'm using the average. So, continue. I'll show you how to actually do the DSL also. So I did this at 500. I'll put that the same. And I got one at 1,000. I got one at 2,000. And I got one at 4,000. So there's my audiogram. Okay, continue. All right. You know what? I'm going to put a different audiogram in, because I just thought this hearing aid is not going to come anywhere near this audiogram. So I'm going to give this patient a more mild hearing loss. How's that? Okay. Just to fit the hearing aid. Okay. All right. Now what you're looking at is an SP Allogram. Here's all the information we just put in, which take you seconds once you're used to it, not even that. And we're looking at an SP allogram. This scale, the y-axis, goes from -10 to 140 dB SPL, covering the whole range of sound. And of course the thresholds go from 125 through 8,000. And here is the audiogram that is converted from HL to SPL, and also corrected. Because if I had tested the hearing in a with headphones, my audiogram is wrong. No matter how well the equipment is calibrated, how well the testing was, how good the environment was, how good the patient was. If I tested a pediatric patient with headphones, the audiogram is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because the headphones were calibrated in a 6cc coupler. A 6cc coupler represents the volume under the cushion, okay? Includes the concha and the ear canal. And so this kid doesn't have 6 cc's. Has probably less than half of that, okay? 12 months old. And so what do you think we're going to have? Wrong audiogram. But the correction is made. DSL makes the correction. Same thing if we did inserts. Say, oh, I used inserts. Well, then that's better for many reasons. But it's not perfect because that's calibrated in a 2cc coupler on your audiometer, which is supposed to represent the volume of this little kid's ear canal. You know it's not 2 cc's. And so this makes the correction for it. That's why it asks you here. Otherwise, what would it care? All right. So here's the thresholds corrected and transformed from HL to SPL, and here are the UCLs. Okay? So below this line is not audible. Above it is audible. Up here is too loud. This dotted line down at the bottom here is the threshold of normal hearing. And so you can show the difference between how normal people hear and how loud it has to be for the patient to hear. Okay. Now, sitting down again and running a curve. Right? There's the target, and we have what's running now is speech. Okay? And here's the selections of stimuli or test signals. See this speech standard 1 and 2? These are paragraphs of actual speech that are recorded inside the instrument that are scientifically designed to represent the absolute average of North American English. Okay? There used to only be one. It's a story about a carrot. And if you've ever heard this carrot thing, it's very nice, but people got sick of it. They'd hear it every single day. They would start having carrot nightmares. They would be singing carrot songs in the carpool on the way to work. People thought they were nuts. So they came up with a standard speech number 2. Okay? It doesn't have a female emphasis. They don't have a male emphasis. They're just the absolute average. Okay? Those are the 2 you would typically use to fit. You could use an international speech signal. You listen to that, it sounds a little weird. Particularly if somebody is from Eastern Europe or Asia. Okay? These languages have a little bit more high frequency in them, so you might want to use that. Guys from Vietnam, he wants to go home to Vietnam and communicate with his people. That might be a good signal to use. If what's important, at least for demonstration purposes or just so you would know, is how does somebody communicate with the average female? So you have an average female voice, average 5-year-old child voice. Live speech is useful, just to show things. Okay? I hope you can see these curves. But if I go to live speech here, I can do a demonstration. See how this will work. Got to open the box. It might work with this. Well, Mr. Jones, if the English language were all vowel sounds, you wouldn't need a hearing aid. I mean, You see that, how audible that was? You hear those things just fine. But the high frequencies is what you're missing. All right, just assume he has worse of a hearing loss, okay? Oh, I'm sorry. Hearing aid is in place. I do that without the hearing aid in place. And I show the need for a hearing aid, because the consonant sounds, sh, s, things like that, are inaudible. Of course, they're audible here because the hearing aid's on there. But, of course, I could show how that, which was not audible before, is audible now. So for demonstration purposes, that's fine. Or, you know, George never comes for dinner when we call him from the hallway. Well, with the hearing aid off, we can see that that's not audible. With the hearing aid on, how it is audible. So you can go out to the hallway and yell for George. Okay. Anyway, live voice we typically don't use for fitting, because you can't control it. We use one of these other ones, mainly 1 and 2 here. These 4, you see speech 3150, 4000, 5000, 6300, they are to show the effectiveness of frequency transposition hearing aids. There is also an ICRA noise. ICRA, most people don't know what ICRA means. You will, because it's International Consortium of Rehabilitative Audiologists, right? It's a speech-like noise. Some people like to use it for fitting. And pink noise I wouldn't use. Okay, so let's just use regular speech. There's our target. And what we're seeing now are 3 curves that represent the amplified or the aided speech banana, right? Let me close up the box. The bottom line are the valleys of speech, the top line are the peaks of speech, and that middle line, which is thicker than the other two, that's the LTAS, long-term average speech spectrum. That's what we want to fall on these targets. These plus signs are the targets, in this case DSL for children. And you notice we are doing this at 55 dB. It's kind of soft speech, okay? So we would like them to meet those targets. So right now, while this is playing live, is when we'd be making adjustments. We would want to lift up the output, the gain at 1000 hertz, because that's not quite making it. Maybe at 2000, and maybe at 4000. I think I'd leave it alone at the others. Once we think we have it adjusted pretty well, we're running this simultaneous with our fitting software, we would hit continue and let it average. The average took 14 seconds. The long-term average speech spectrum, LTAS. This is the amplified speech banana. You want to see the unamplified speech banana? You can always show that. Boom. See what I did? I went down to show hide and I said to show this just unaided speech banana. It's just for purposes of explanation. We took the LTAS, long-term average speech spectrum, which was audible in low frequencies. If the English language was all low frequencies, we wouldn't need a hearing aid for this guy. But he missed these higher frequencies, the consonant sounds, okay? And so we took the LTAS, which was not audible in the high frequencies, from here to there, all right? Our target was these plus signs. If this was an adult, if we changed the target to NL1 or 2, that would have been fine. But there's more gain for children because, why? They are still learning speech. Okay, so that is a good counseling tool. So if this was my final fitting, how would I feel? Well, I wouldn't be crying because I have made soft speech audible. People who don't use a target would be happy with this. I have made soft speech audible. I've put it above the threshold. So that's not bad. If I could, I would just I just tweak up a little bit my overall gain and maybe try it again to get a little closer to these targets. Next thing to do is to run one at conversational speech. Okay, so I am now running a 65 dB signal on it, and I have another color, purple instead of green, and I have my targets there, and I'm trying to adjust it so that the center line hovers actually on that target most of the time. After I'm done adjusting, I would hit continue. Okay, and this one, of course, it didn't make the targets either. Okay, it did here at 4,000, but it didn't quite make it, because it's a purple target now. It didn't quite make it at 2 or 1 or 5, so I would just maybe tweak up my gain a little bit to make that happen. Okay, and the third thing that most people run is an MPO. What happens when this patient goes into a loud situation? Okay, and we have little MPO targets. See these little plus signs? And notice that the MPO targets, MPO is maximum power output, the MPO targets are below the UCLs, okay? Because we want to keep the output of the hearing aid below the UCLs, so that, and we didn't figure out these UCLs on this patient. Of course, you wouldn't be able to get them. They were determined by the software. And so, while this was running, I would turn down the maximum power output adjustments on the hearing aid, maybe at a couple of these places. Here, this is under the target, which is just fine. This one's a little over, and so are these. So I just take these 2 peaks out of here, using those controls. Not trying to, not controls that would affect this, but I want to control this just high level. Okay, and hearing aid fitting software will have that. When I've got it pretty good, then I just hit continue. It does one final run and connects the dots, and you've got it. And this is typically how you print it out, okay, or save it to NOAA, or whatever you're going to do with it. Okay, there is a very nice new NOAA interface that you would love. And even if you didn't have that, it's a $500 option. Even if you didn't have that, you could stick a memory stick in here, and you could save all the patients on that. Don't even need an interface. And you could print out to a regular printer or the internal printer. So now we don't see the whole speech banana here. We could, under Show Hide, we can show any of them. See? Or if we just like to show in the final, as a final result, the LTS only, that's fine too. But here's what we got versus the target, the green line, with soft speech, 55 dB. We've made soft speech audible, not quite at target level for DSL. And we've made average speech, 65 dB, not only audible but comfortable. Comfortable's 10-15 dB above threshold at least. Not quite on target, but if I was able to adjust it, I certainly would have adjusted it while it was running live. And the MPO needs to be tweaked because this patient is probably going to have a tough time at those frequencies in loud environments. Okay? Makes sense? I hope so. And as I said, the real ear measurement part of it, that you actually do on the ear, will run very much the same. All right, now don't panic because we're almost done, but I want to show you a couple more things. I'm going to tests, and this time I'm going to on-ear measurements. Okay? Now I get a different menu for on-ear measurements, all the same thing we talked about. Okay? You can do on-ear. I'd rather do all this stuff in the test box. And insertion gain is the old type of real ear measurement that we used to do. Real ear insertion response, okay? That I wouldn't do. I'd go right to speech map. Most appropriate for, you know, modern hearing aids. Because you got to use speech or something like ICRA or International Speech Signal. Something that has all the characteristics of speech. No tone that's sweeping through from low to high frequencies. You remember those? Or complex noise or speech noise or pink noise or anything else like that. Okay? It really has to be speech or a complex speech signal like ICRA or the international speech, which the hearing aid will process as it processes true speech. Because it has all of the characteristics, not just the spectral characteristics like speech noise. What good is that? The machine will process that completely differently than actual speech, the hearing aid will. So not only the spectral characteristics, but the temporal characteristics and every other possible characteristic. Okay, so now we're doing this on ear, just to show you a couple of things. All right, these are the probes. All right, they will hang along on the patient's ear like so. Okay, and there are two microphones involved, just like you had two microphones in here. One is at the end of that tube, and the other one is right there. The one right there is the regulator microphone. Okay, and this is the measurement microphone at the end of this tube. So what we'll have to do before we do anything is the calibration. Okay, only takes a second. And you only do this like once a day, once a week, or when you change this tube. So I'm going back to my menus and my on-ear measurements. I see calibration. And by the way, you don't have to remember to calibrate it because it knows how long it's been. All right? And in 1 week, 1 week after you calibrate it, when it knows that it needs another calibration, when you try to run the first curve, it will stop and say, hey, got to calibrate. And you'll calibrate. So, but I'm forcing it into a calibration now. And so I have placed this tube through these two little posts, and so that the tube actually sits on top of, the end of the tube sits on top of the little reference microphone that I can see there. I know you can't see this on the camera. And then I hold it just within a foot of this speaker now, the speaker that's at the top of the Verifit, or wherever the speaker is, okay? And just hit calibrate. Oops, now that looks terrible. What's wrong? I know what's wrong. It's a test. So, I have the right one in my hand. I have the left one in my hand, but right is selected. Okay, so I'm going to change to left and then do it. By the way, this curve, this white curve, that's what it should look like when I'm done. Let's see how we do. Pretty good. Done. Now, I'll do the same thing with the right one because I just screwed it up. Okay, I just use this left-right switch and calibrate. See? Probably should be within a foot. Okay. Okay, so it's calibrated, and right click brings me back to my menu. I hit test, on-ear measurements, and speech map. It's the only thing I use in on-ear. Boom. Okay. So now let's say I have a patient that's a little older. This patient is, say, 60 months old. He's 5 years old. And so let's see what we're going to do. On this patient, we've decided the patient is semi-cooperative. I don't think I can do a full fitting. 2 hearing aids in, tubes in, using all my fitting software and all that. So I'm going to do simulated real ear measurement. But I want to get an RECD. Rather than using the average for a 60-month-old from the University of Western Ontario, I want to actually measure the RECD. Well, I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, let's set this up. Notice open fit in here. Before we're done, I'm going to show you what makes that different. All right? But on this kit, I got a BTE. Yes, it's on ear this time instead of simulated in the box. And single view, it's a graph instead of a table, it's SPL instead of HL. And let's fill out the rest of this. My kid now is older. I'm choosing DSL child, but 60 months old. There you go. And how did I get the audiogram, this time inserts? And I'm going to use no conductive hearing loss. Excuse me. The UCL, the average is fine. But look at this. On RECD, instead of using the average, this time I'm going to try to measure. Now it's going to make me measure it because I put measure in there. Okay? Okay, I can enter the audiogram and hit continue. And now, since I said measure, it's going to make me measure the RECD. Okay? And the first thing it wants me to do is measure the response of the coupler, the BTE coupler. Okay? So we're going to do that. And here's how we're going to do it. Here, I can unplug this and show you. And I have another way to show you too. There is a thing called an RECD transducer, like this. I'm actually going to plug it into the coupler. Okay? Plugging it right into the coupler. Coupler's on the coupler microphone. Coupler microphone is plugged in. And you might say, oh, I missed that because I couldn't see it. I'll show it to you. How do I show it to you? Right click, help. And it's going to go right to it. It knows where we are and it's going right to it. All right, the RECD coupler response, boom. Okay, so here's that coupler transducer, RECD transducer, not coupler transducer, RECD transducer, attached to the BTE coupler. So we're going to send a signal into this and get a response. Okay? So, measure coupler. Now it gives me a 4-point instruction to do what I just said to do. Continue. That green line, this, is the response of the coupler. Okay? And I'll hit continue. All right, now we know the response of the coupler. And in fact, see, I could put weekly down here. In other words, if I'm doing this every single day, it's not even going to ask me what the response of the coupler is tomorrow and the next day and the next day. It won't be a week until I need to make a coupler, the coupler part of the measurement again. But now I want to know what the response of my patient's ear is. And once the machine knows the response of the ear and the response of the coupler, the patient can go home. I can order the hearing aid, get it in, fit it and everything. And then call the patient in. It's already fit. Now it's all about mom, dad, how to get the hearing aid in, how to get it out, how to get them to use it, etc., etc. Okay? So, you might even find some adult patients you want to do that on. So I'm putting this around my ear. I'm putting the tube in the ear. And then I'm going to put the RECD transducer right in there with it. Okay? There are times I forgot to calibrate this and I got it all snug in my ear without having calibrated it. Oh, what a shame that was. Okay, what you typically use on this guy is just one of these foam things. Tubes down in the ear canal. So is that. And we're going to push just exactly what you'd think we would push, measure real ear. Gives you instructions to do what we just did. Now, here's a good point. If you see this, don't do it. Because this is dead wrong. You got to know what a good one looks like. Okay? I'm glad this happened. It wasn't meant to happen, but I'm glad it's happened. If you're going to measure a bogus RECD, it's better not do it, use the average, because the average will be close. You want to be exact, exact, exact. That's why you're doing it. But it has to be a good one. This is bogus. Let's see the difference between this and what it's supposed to look like. So I'm going to hit cancel here. and not use that. If I use that, I am making a big mistake. Okay. All right. My problem is that I didn't have the tube in far enough. I did initially, and it fell out. It's important to have it in far enough because if you don't, you get a bogus measurement. And first-time users of freehand measurement, that's their problem. They don't have the tube in far enough. It's just a little bit difficult for me to do it on myself. And to get it in there beyond the ear hair. All right, let's see if that's far enough. Most of the time I have an assistant who puts it in for me. Just as bad. Now don't go saying if he can't do it, I can't do it. You can do it. And people who are used to this don't even think about it. It's just hard to do on your own ear. Because you can't see what you're doing. I get lucky about half of the time, and it goes right in. And I know when it hits the eardrum that it's in there. So we're going to try it one more time, and then I'm going to give up. And I'm going to show you what it should look like, because it's in the help. The help on this is actually good and useful. I never read the manual, so I'm not recommending that. And you can print that out. But using the help now and then is like looking up something in the manual. All right, let's see. Maybe they'll edit this out. All right, one more try. No? All right, forget that. I just can't do it on myself. If I had an assistant here, it would be easy. All right, what should it look like? Just canceling. Cancel. Cancel. All right. Oh, no. I want to go to RECD. And then I want to do help. Okay, here. Coupler response, on-ear response. This is how you should set it up in the ear. See, the tube is in, and it's in far enough. You can measure the depth and move that black indicator that's on the tube. Then the foam is in. And the results, this is how they should look. I hope you can see this, because here was the real ear response. Here's the coupler response, the green one, like we have. Okay? And here's the response of the actual ear. And this is a real ear to coupler difference. Okay? And so this is what it should look like on a typical kit right here. All right? The dotted line is the typical adult. If mine was right, it wouldn't be way up here. It would be almost the same as that dotted line, typical adult. And you expect a child to be above it, like, depending on how small the ear canal is. All right? If you have this come down like a tail like that, then you don't have a good fit. You don't have a good seal. Okay? But that's how that should look. Okay? So this is typical on a child that's maybe 60 months old. A smaller child that may be further above the average adult RECD. Mine should have been practically right on it with slight variations, maybe to lows and highs, if I had it in there right. It was so far from it that I knew that was wrong. And if I couldn't do it, I'd just take the average. But you can do it every single time if you, and I'd be able to too if I had an assistant, but I'm all by myself today. So, okay, anyway, that's the RECD. Otherwise, the test proceeds exactly the way that we showed it. In fact, this little demonstration that I was trying to make of the need for a hearing aid that I can show, this is not for measurement purposes, but just for demonstration purposes. I can hang that on the ear, no hearing aid or anything. And I can go here and just choose live. And now I'm showing the patient what's audible and what's not audible. Let's say this is hanging on their ear. I'm about a meter away from them. Okay. Put it down here because it was picking up the noise from the projector. So, Mr. Jones, your hearing in the low frequencies is pretty good. If the English language were all low frequencies, you wouldn't need a hearing aid at all. If they were all vowel sounds, ooh, ah, ee, you would need a hearing aid because everything above this line is audible to you. The part of speech that's not audible to you is the part of speech, because right now you're looking at my speech, that is playing right here, okay? This is all speech. Low frequencies, vowel sounds, audible. High frequencies, not audible. What are the high frequencies that are consonant sounds? So look, it's not audible. Also not audible. So it's a great way to show the need for hearing aid. No hearing aid on, just hanging on the ear. All we're trying to do is look at sounds at the ear level and how they relate to the audiogram. Okay? So live voice is good for demonstration. Naturally, for actual testing, I would use one of these two standards or the international, and then a special case like, well, I hear the guys down at the Burger King in the morning just fine, but I can't understand a word that women, especially my wife, say. Okay, well, then you can, after you do the fitting, you can try female speech, okay, to make sure you handle that all right. Or I can't hear the grandkids, well, the child speech. I could play that child speech for you.
When I was a little girl, I got
Listen
sick.
to this.
That's when I came to Children's Hospital. It's a hospital just for kids. The nurses and doctors helped me and my family when we felt very scared inside. When I was a little girl, I got sick. That's when I came to Children's Hospital.
Now, isn't that great? All we do is play that for pediatric audiologists, so they got to have it. So there's one more very significant thing that I want to talk about before we finish this session, and that is open fit hearing aids. Most practices use open fit hearing aids for a large percentage of their patients, and rightfully so. The patients like them. They're lightweight, they're comfortable, the ear isn't occluded, and they don't have to wait for a custom ear mold. A whole bunch of reasons, and so let's talk. Let's have our final discussion about that. It's probably the most significant thing that we talk about here. And of course, the function that we're going to use is on-ear measurements only. You won't find, and it's speech mapping, of course, and you won't find an open fit even available in the choice of hearing aids in the test box mode. Right? You'll only find this in the on-ear mode. Why? Because it's inappropriate to do fittings of open fit hearing aids in a simulated mode, because then they're not an open fit. Okay, so suppose we do that. We choose an open fit. When we do, everything operates the same as we've been doing all along. The same as we've even done when we've done simulated real ear measurement in a test box, except for one very important thing. One thing changes, and it's very important, and here's why. You can imagine when open fits first came out, and people that were doing real ear measurement, including visible speech mapping on them, would use their equipment as they normally did. And they got horrible results. In fact, it was said by almost every hearing aid manufacturer and their reps, you can't do real ear measurement on these open fit hearing aids. And they were right, because there was a problem, a big problem. And this is what it was. When the device is on the ear like this, there are, as I said before, two microphones. One at the end of the tube, which is in the ear canal with the hearing aid, or in this case, it's down in the ear canal past the dome. Always use a dome when doing open fits. The dome helps hold the tube in, and of course the end of the tube is, sufficiently past the dome. Okay, but since there's no seal in the ear, amplified sound leaks out of the ear, and these systems are generally all regulated systems. By regulated, I mean there is a reference microphone right here on the body of the probe, where my little finger is. And that reference microphone measures the intensity of the stimulus, the signal, at the ear level. And it forces the stimulus level to be correct. 55 dB if you've selected that for soft speech, 65 dB for average speech, etc. Okay? If the patient is wearing this, and he got up from his seat, and where should his seat be? You're looking straight at this. This is at ear level, and so you're at 0 degrees to it, and as close as comfortably possible. All right? But let's say for some reason he got up and he walked away. He walked back to the back of the room. Well, of course, this would have to get a lot louder to make 65 dB way back there. Well, the microphone on this reference microphone would sense that, and it would say, hey, we need more power in order to do it. It would keep the proper level at the ear. That's why it's called a reference microphone. It controls the output of the system. The problem with open fits, where the amplified sound, since there's no seal, is leaking out of the ear, and as it leaks out of the ear, where does it go? Well, right to this reference microphone, which is right there. Okay, and when it does, the system says, oh, it's too loud, shut it down. Okay, and everything's bogus. So that reference microphone cannot control the system. Okay, drawing the test. Okay, drawing the measurement that we make. So when you select open fit in the on-ear mode, and you start your first test, something pops up that didn't pop up before. This equalize thing. What that does is you have the patient sitting wherever he's going to sit, just as close as comfortable in front of the unit. And you say, okay, you're going to sit there. You're not going to push your chair back. You're not going to get up. And we're not going to bring a piano in the room and change the acoustics. Nothing's going to happen. We don't need a regulated system here, okay? Because you're going to stay in this position that you're in, get comfortable, and when you hit equalize, it's going to calibrate the patient in place. When you hit equalize, you will have the hearing aid off. In fact, this says, equalize sound field, with hearing aid turned off or muted, right? So you don't even have to have the hearing aid in the ear. You just have this thing on the ear, because all we're using at this point is the reference microphone. And we're going to calibrate the patient in situ here, in place, and then we're going to shut the reference microphone off for all other measurements. So when you hear that, that's the calibration signal. So we just calibrated the patient in space. The thing measured here, so it knows what signal it delivered, it knows what it measured, it made the appropriate gain change. And now if nothing changes, that'll be fine. So we'll hit continue, and the measurement will continue. Okay? That's the difference. That is the difference. A regulated system versus a system that is calibrated once at the beginning, very quickly, instantly, automatically, before any measurement is made. And once that calibration is done, the reference mic is now out of play. So that amplified sound, when it leaks out of the system, it doesn't have an effect. Okay? It doesn't get to that reference mic and throw it off. Okay? Anyway, that's important to know, because this is the function that most people use most of the time with these, if they're fitting adults, and so that's very significant. And not only the Verifit, but naturally the Axiom and the portable Verifit, and the other products by the other manufacturers all of them have now a function similar to that for the specific purpose of open fits. Okay, makes sense? So now there's no problem using these with any hearing aid. We're using the signal, speech itself, so that it's processed by the hearing aid exactly how speech will be processed, as opposed to other noise. And we can verify all the functions and special features of the hearing aid, and we can fit it scientifically instead of driving blind. Okay, so I hope that has helped you understand the operation of the equipment, and I hope that it helps you get the most out of it. And so hopefully we will see you again on some other instructional video from Med-Acoustics. Have a great day. Bye now.